We recently spoke of Zion and becoming like it, and perhaps there's no greater example of a people who lived like Zion, other than Zion, than those who lived after Christ visited the Americas. It's recorded that they lived after the manner of happiness, that there was no contentions or strifes among them, no fornications, no wickedness at all, and this lasted for generations. Many of us are striving for happiness, especially happiness described like that, but what really is happiness? Aristotle said, happiness is an activity of the soul in accordance with virtue. An activity of the soul, of body and mind. And in accordance with virtue, what does that mean? The pairing of what we do with virtue to produce happiness. It's a riddle that I think was expanded on by Joseph Smith when he said, happiness is the object and design of our existence, and will be the end thereof, if we pursue the path that leads to it. And this path is virtue, uprightness, faithfulness, holiness, and keeping all the commandments of God. I believe it becomes apparent, then, that we're not really trying to be happy. We are pursuing a path that leads to it. We're trying to appreciate that happiness comes as a natural outflow from our actions. The attempt to pursue the strict emotion is rife with flaws in morality. Someone might say, go do what makes you happy. Go pursue a career that makes you happy. Well, there's plenty of careers that might make you happy, but you might suck at. And the pursuit of something you think you enjoy might actually ruin you. Perhaps the same could be said of some of the moral pursuits of our day. The path we pursue that leads to happiness. Immanuel Kant said, morality is not properly the doctrine of how we may make ourselves happy, but how we may make ourselves worthy of happiness. True happiness does not come from sin. It only comes from righteousness. And again, it is not something that we pursue in and of itself. It is that we pursue a path of virtue and hope for happiness to be a reward. Quite often, however, the path of virtue does not lead to immediate happiness. It did not do so for many civilizations and cultures who strive for righteousness and are persecuted for it. But does that mean they lack happiness? So we must pursue a path to happiness, not because it's our goal. Therefore, I believe that if we could change a part of the Constitution, for me, it would be that we have a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of virtue. Speaking of the Constitution, it's also the part of the nature of man to be part of a community, part of some kind of government. The communities of this world, however, are rife with a lack of virtue, and countless books have been written on laws governing man and the principles of doing so. Some are attempts at virtue. Some societies are commanded by tyranny. A lot of the thoughts I go through are on enjoyable books about the future. Many books and movies have been made with futuristic viewpoints on dystopian societies, and examples of this are Hunger Games, Maze Runner, Terminator, The Stand is one of my wife's favorites. I really like Book of Eli, Atlas Shrugged, 1984, The Matrix, I think is one that's much more relatable now. All of these are quite enjoyable futurists' perspectives on a possible end. As I go back to The Matrix, there's a quote by Swami Vivekananda who said, "Everybody is hypnotized already. The work of attaining freedom, of realizing one's real nature, consists in de-hypnotization. We live in a world now where all of these dystopian futures are very relatable. Whether you feel you've been red-pilled, whether you see the flaw in the media constantly correcting what it has said in the past for a constant politically correct present, like in 1984. Whether you see the political struggles, the economic struggles in Atlas Shrugged, all of these dystopian societies in the future lend us a view into ourselves, into our world right now. As much as we are striving for some kind of utopia, we are in the middle of a system that controls the way we think, the way we act, everything we do, in a very real way. Noam Chomsky said, "The whole educational and professional training system is a very elaborate filter, which just weeds out people who are too independent and who think for themselves, and who don't know how to be submissive, and so on, because they're dysfunctional to the institutions." When Rockefeller originally contributed to the educational system, he spoke of wanting to create a society that create cogs in a wheel, not intelligent people, but people willing to just work 8 hours a day, sitting at a desk, punching in and punching out on time for their lunches and their breaks. School is very much a real dystopia that we're living through today. Another book that I think has some of the most clear dystopian relevance to our day is Brave New World. This book was written by Aldous Huxley. Yeah, I said that right. He speaks of a technological advancement far in the future. He wrote his book in the 30s. And he spoke of a first half of the 20th century as an era of technical engineers, and the second half as an era of social engineers. He spoke then of the 21st century as an era of the world controllers, a scientific caste system, and Brave New World. In his book, he depicts a government that goes through the process of mind controlling all of its subjects, not through a matrix download to your brain, but through the process of using hypnotism. It's been learned that we experience a difference in suggestibility when we are conscious and focused versus when we are experiencing the hypnotist kind of state of our brain. It's a difference between what is called beta waves and alpha waves. With beta waves, we're focused, we're paying attention, we learn. With alpha waves, during hypnosis, during a state of light sleep, we are suggestible at a very high degree. Much in the sciences of psychology have established these evidences of suggestibility, and governments have abused these. Especially, however, research has been done that these states of mind where we enter a passive alpha wave brain state occurs when we watch television. It occurs as we are zoning out, if you will, and this nonstop manipulation that comes through distraction, that comes through cultural influences that we're currently, and so for some people, near constantly exposed to, impact our views. These new patterns of feelings are installed in our brains. Old ones are modified. Post-hypnotic commands can be given. Slogans, formulas, and trigger words are deeply ingrained in our memories. This is all done in a sea of irrelevance and a lack of rational information. There have been many of these dystopian views of conditioning, but this is not the brainwaves alone. In his book Brave New World, he also, Aldous Huxley implies that there will be drugs given to the society that also subject them to different feelings and make them suggestible. There's a man named Juste Merlot who said, "Any man who escapes from reality through the use of alcohol and drugs is no longer a free agent. He is no longer able to exert any voluntary control over his mind and his actions. Alcoholism and drug addiction prepare the pattern of mental submission so beloved by the totalitarian brainwasher. Drugs can be used to make a man submissive and a conforming being." So as well as tranquilizing, hallucinating, and stimulating, these drugs, and in Aldous Huxley's book, Brave New World, he spoke of it as a drug called soma, having a heightening suggestibility given to the people, and the government used this drug constantly to reinforce the effects of its propaganda. We live in a world where this dystopian view of the future is a reality. We are being continually fed propaganda from a government that wishes to control us. In the end, I think the most relevant thing that I can say is this: the devil did not give up fighting his war. When he was cast down to earth, and a third of the host of heaven with him, he established on this earth his kingdom. As he influences man and strives to corrupt them, I believe that Satan has not given up on his plan. He seeks, even before our very eyes, to create the kind of world that is the fulfillment of his vision. He is creating a world where we are controlled. He is creating a world where every thought we have is subject to propaganda and influence. And we are experiencing a time where, with the tyrannies of the world colluding together, an entire population of a planet is being subjected to pharmacological experimentation, psychological experimentation, a false pandemic in an attempt to control our minds, to create fear in us that is so extreme that we will accept anything less rather than fight for freedom. Aldous Huxley has one other quote. He says, "There will be, in the next generation or so, a pharmacological method of making people love their servitude, and producing dictatorships without tears, so to speak, producing a kind of painless concentration camp for entire societies, so that people will in fact have their liberties taken away from them, but will rather enjoy doing it, because they will be distracted from any desire to rebel by propaganda or brainwashing enhanced by pharmacological methods. And this seems to be the final revolution." There are speculations that we are being not just manipulated and influenced, but that these influences are meant to subject us to the control of an elite, a secret combination that will endeavor to control the whole earth. I believe it is our duty to awake ourselves to these awful situations so that we may recognize not only the dire time we live in, but that we can break free. We can take that red pill and wake ourselves out of the matrix By doing so, we will find ourselves at odds with a very large beast. We will find it ominous and nearly impossible to think that we could fight against it. But it is not a fight that we are trying to win, or win alone. This world will face a future that lines up with every one of those dystopian books and movies in some way. But we can separate ourselves out. We can truly pursue virtue, and by doing so, we can find happiness as a result thereof, not through conforming to what the world would have us do, but to the gospel's principles. And the happiness we may find may not come. It may not come in our lifetime, but that reward will come in eternity. It is the end desire of God to bring about our happiness. He only can do this by encouraging our virtue. So as we strive for a utopia, let us not get frustrated if we fall short. The prophecies of our day do not reflect success in that regard, at least not right away, and not without help. But with Christ's help, the millennium truly will be the utopia. And it will be a utopia not of force, not of control, not of manipulation, not of drugs or hypnosis. It will be a millennium full of righteousness, as following the principle taught by Joseph Smith, when he was asked how he was creating a kind of utopia in the cities he governed. He said, "I teach them correct principles, and they govern themselves. Let us govern ourselves, following a path of virtue, and we will find happiness."